Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Breaking Point podcast. Today, we are here with Hannah Lewis Darnell. Is that right?
It is, but I go by Hannah Octavia is
Ha-
my stage name.
That's your stage name, Hannah Octavia. Can I just
Yeah,
call you Hannah?
you can absolutely call me Hannah.
Okay, cool. And Hannah is the host of the Seasoned Professional podcast, which is a podcast you speak to like seasoned professionals is probably the best way of putting it. I mean, how would you describe it? Have you got a better sort of description?
I think that sounds pretty good. I do speak to seasoned professionals in a variety of different fields, and we kind of just talk through their life, how they got to where they are today. And it's really fun because I get to explore a lot of like the deviations that people make while getting to their successful career. Some of my most
Hmm.
listened to
Okay.
podcast episodes have been, people who have diverted from the successful path that they thought they were going to be on, gone to an ashram and practiced like spirituality and meditation, and then diverted back to the path that they were originally on. So lots of things that I never thought I would learn is what I'm learning.
And why did you start? When did you start the podcast, and why did you start it?
So I started it, the idea like blossomed in February of 2024. I was about to say, is it 2026? No, it's 2025.
It's 2025.
It's 2025.
Crazy times.
I know. So yeah, the idea blossomed about a year-ish ago. And then I started recording. I had help from a really good friend, Elliot, who was kind of by my side at the beginning, and now he's off pursuing his own passions. And then we released the first episode October 13th, and we've been kind of going from there. I have about 20 episodes at the time of this recording, and I guess yeah, we're chugging along. We're trying to get all my guests sorted. I guess the reason I started the podcast was because as a little kid, all I ever wanted to be was a teacher. And I would only ever get like praise from that. So, like, my parents would be so impressed by the fact that I knew what I wanted to do. My friends would say that they were jealous of me because I knew what I wanted to be. And because of all that praise and like it like reinforced me into becoming a teacher almost. And I didn't really explore any other paths. So when I went to university, I was essentially stuck. The way it works in Canada is you do something called a concurrent education program. And it's like 6 years that are intertwined and you cannot break them free. So, 4 years in, I would be breaking down in lecture, thinking to myself that I didn't want to continue with the teaching profession, but there was no way out of that program. So I ended up pursuing it anyways and like finishing my degrees and it was all fine. But, you know,
6 years.
6 years, yeah, 6 years. So you have to do a 4-year undergrad and then a 2-year teacher's college. It used to be
Yeah.
5 years, but, you know,
Yeah, you do 4 years, don't you, in America and Canada? We have 3 years in the UK.
yeah.
But you do it differently because how does it work? Do you have like a major and then
Major.
you a major?
You just had an accent there.
I did it deliberately, yeah, yeah, yeah. A major. And then would you have minors as well? How many minors do you have, so to speak?
I don't have that particularly. My program is very strange because essentially, I have a Bachelor of Arts with a specialization in general science. So it's not like a minor or a major. And then I have like a Bachelor of Education. So I technically have 2 degrees, which is why it took so long.
Ah,
But
that's fair enough.
so that's a benefit of going that
Yeah.
path. So you got
6
lucky.
years, 2 degrees. I guess in the UK, 3 years for an undergrad and maybe 1 to 2 years for a postgrad.
Yeah.
So then you were a teacher. How long and actually, why did you want to be a teacher so bad growing up?
I I really liked helping people. I was quite bossy as a kid. So not that teachers are bossy, but you like to be the center of attention. You like to I'm I don't know why I have this lit on my hand. Anyway, you like to be the center of attention and you like to kind of be the leader in a sense. So I just thought it was a
Yeah.
really nice fit. I have a little brother and, growing up he would always play teacher and student or mom and baby. Like I always have had that like leadership ability. Like even in my like play as a child, it was
Mm.
being a leader and trying to help people or teach people things. And yeah, I just never really drifted away from that. And I always liked school. So I thought that, it would be a nice fit to kind of go back and teach it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a good point, actually. You don't often hear, I don't think teachers say, "Oh, I actually quite like school, so I wanted to go back." You do get a lot of teachers that say, maybe I feel like you get a lot of teachers who say, "Oh, I had one good teacher and they were really helpful and I wanted to go and try and recreate that with another with a future student."
Mhm.
Mm. That's good that you like school. Is I mean, that we're going really off topic, but what's school like in Canada? That's you, yeah, from Canada,
I would
right?
say actually, when I started teaching in the UK, I noticed, like, vast differences.
That's something we could definitely get onto, yeah, I'd like to talk
Yeah,
about.
I'll save that for later. What's school like? Pretty similar to here, like, no matter where you go, kids will always be the same, so there's always, like, the popular crew or, you know, the I don't know, the really intelligent school-oriented people,
Yeah,
and I was always very I don't know, like, the more I've looked back at my schooling, I'm like, "Oh gosh," like, I liked it, but I would never wanna go back there, like, as a student. Like, going back to be a student just, like, causes me stress. I don't know if you still have the dreams where you, like, wake up and you're panicked because you, like, forgot an exam or something. That just, like, brings me right back to those times, and when you mentioned, like, oh, people often have a specific teacher that inspired them to do that, I guess I kind of have had that, but I've also had teachers that I've absolutely hated and have wanted to be the complete opposite of. But yeah, like, I remember my grade 1 teacher just being such, like, a kind person, and it's never about, like, "Oh, I'm really passionate about the curriculum, and I wanna, like, impart the curriculum on my students." It's always been about, like, I want to positively impact my students, create positive relationships and help them grow into, like, the people they'll eventually become, less so about curriculum, which is why I think I've kind of, like, strayed away from it because the focus is so
yes.
much on curriculum.
That I had, 2 guys on the podcast who run their own podcast called the Teach, Sleep, Repeat podcast, which is really good. I should put you in contact with them. They're doing really, really well,
Yeah.
and they were basically saying that the reason they love teaching is because they get to sort of, like, craft these little people in ways that is really potentially beneficial. And I used to do, I used to be a teaching assistant for a special needs school for kids, and I was often put with the behaviorally challenging students, which was very difficult, especially when I was really, really young.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. It's a very powerful, very, very rewarding thing to do. So have you never taught in Canada?
I have. So I've taught in Canada and the UK. I was doing like just like cover work for a while and then I had my own class. And it was crazy. Like, you know, we can talk about like all the positive teaching, but there's also it's like I think people who haven't been in the profession obviously you understand because you've been in the profession. They don't like you just can't wrap your mind around how much it takes and how invested you have to be. I've always been very type A, very kind of perfectionist. I've always wanted to like I'm quite a creative person and I always have like ideas of like how I can make things better and I want to implement all these things. And my first teaching job where I had my own classroom was like such a huge wake up call to the fact that you cannot do everything. There's only a certain amount of time in the day. And as much as it's like disheartening, I almost felt like, yeah, I felt like really disheartened when I realized that I couldn't actually manage everything. But it was a good lesson in choosing the things that matter most and focusing on that.
Do you mean you couldn't manage every child individually, or what do you mean by that?
I think like in some scenarios, yes. When you have a class of 30 and you're the only teacher, it can be so hard to meet everyone where they're at, and it can be so difficult to it can just be it's really challenging when there's one of you and 30 of them.
Yeah.
But specifically what I meant is, like, I'd have all these ideas of, like, "Oh, we're gonna have classroom jobs. We're gonna do, like, assemblies every week." Like, I just had so many of these, like, little creative ideas that I could implement around the curriculum and around the lessons, and there's just not enough time. Like, I remember making this, like, giant poster board of, like, all the classroom jobs. It never happened just because, like, there was not enough time in the day, and
What is this in the UK or was this in
this
Canada?
was back in Canada. Yeah,
Okay.
so
How old were the
it's
kids?
they were 12, 13, um, and it was a crazy experience because I got hired in January, and they had not had a teacher for 6 weeks prior. So they literally had new cover teachers every single day. And so you can imagine the disarray that I kind of
Yeah.
went into. And, the classroom was like, it was like dusty. There was nothing on the walls. It was like, had this like gray sheen to it. And I remember going in the day that like I had agreed that I was going to take this on. And some of the other teachers had told me, like, this is where they're at in math. This is where they're at in geography. This is where they're at in English. And just like all this stuff that I suddenly had to take on.
Mm.
I just broke down in front of a class of 30, 13-year-olds, and I literally cried in front of them. And yeah, it was an interesting first day. And I remember the teacher who I'd been speaking to was like, "Oh, do you want to go out? Like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I just kind of like stood there, and I just I'm very much a let's talk about things that are happening. So I kind of just stood at the front of the class and was like, "Yeah, I just cried here. Does anyone have any questions about that?" And we kind of carried on with the day. But it was very much like a
Why did you cry? Do you
because I
think?
was so overwhelmed. I felt like the success of these children was like lying on my back. And it was my first class for myself.
Well, fair enough, dear.
I was kind of like I was literally thrown in the deep end. Like, I was not interviewed for the position. I did not apply for the position. I literally walked in one day and they said, "Will you stay?" And I said, "Sure." Like, I don't know if it would be similar here in the UK. I've had experiences where that has happened here as well, where I just walk in and they're like, "We need you. Can you please stay?"
Yeah.
But it's pretty crazy when, yeah, you just kind of are thrown in. And honestly, it was a great class. I love them so much. When I moved over here, um, I wrote them each a letter, and then they wrote me a bunch of letters back.
Individually?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Every class that I leave, like, we have, like, placements during Teachers College. So all of my classes, I write letters to each of the kids because I honestly like, there's something about students that is just, like, they're so inspiring, like, their entire lives are ahead of them, and I don't know, I always like to leave them with a little memento of, like, "Keep trying," or "You did really well at this," and, like,
Yeah.
you know, keep pursuing that.
That's so Canadian of you, isn't it? It's classic.
Yeah, very Canadian. I can't remember, did I do that here? I think I did. I think I did. I do it everywhere. I love to write little notes for people.
No, that's very sweet. No, I get that. I think we need more of that sort of behavior in teaching nowadays. So, do you like, are you a cover teacher now? Is that why? Is it because it's the Easter holidays? You're not.
Yes. So I'm back to school tomorrow. Pretty much my work life at the moment is a chaotic mess.
Yes, I can imagine.
As you being a creative, I'm sure you can understand that as much as, and I'm not sure about your financial position, but as much as I would like my podcast to be my main thing, it
Yeah.
provides me with no financial income.
No.
So I do a variety of different things. I'm a nanny, so I look after like a little boy, and then I also work at a high school as a science teacher. But it's like both things are part time, which together makes a full time job. If that
Yes,
makes
that makes sense. Nice
sense.
split.
Yeah.
Split the day up. Split the week up. Even. I wouldn't have picked you for a science teacher. That's interesting.
Yeah. What would you pick me for?
Like, God, what do I say here? What would I pick you?
Drama.
Yeah, the drama, or maybe like geography.
God, horrific. No. No, no, no. I'm science, and then I'm thinking of getting my math because math is such an
Math,
interesting
by the
topic
way.
to me. Pardon?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. No,
I just
math
said
is
maths. It's maths, but used to be math.
right, you're right. It's maths. Honestly, the amount of times that people correct me, that's another thing that has been such like a different thing here is that I'll say everyone's name with like a slight accent. So children perceive it that I'm saying it wrong. And it's a whole kerfuffle, but, it's okay.
Kerfuffle. God, what a word. So, do you think's different between teaching in Canada as opposed to teaching in the UK?
I feel like I can only answer this so much because in the grand scheme of things, I only have a very small segment of experience in both Canada and the UK.
Okay.
But just really, really briefly, I suppose, I think the UK has a lot more. like rote curriculum and rote learning. And what I mean by that is like spelling tests are a thing and, repetitive learning of timetables and specific things that in Canada and specifically Ontario where I teach, I've been told by my colleagues that it's kind of frowned upon to teach in that method. And personally, like my philosophy when it comes to things like learning the times tables, using programs like TT Rockstars is an excellent way to do that. And at
Yeah.
the very basis of TT Rockstars is rote learning. It's that like,
I wish I had that.
yeah, what did you use?
We just used every Friday, we would just get a times table grid that we had to fill out,
Yeah, same.
and we were timed, and we just had to do it in a certain period of time.
I know. Yeah, that is me. That was me as well. So I guess there are more similarities than I initially thought. Like that was exactly my childhood, but I think nowadays in 2025, like that is not the case back home in Canada.
And that's
I just think there are certain things that benefit from like repetition when it comes to learning. And that's what I kind of appreciate. And I think what I'll take home if I continue with the whole teaching profession when I go back to Canada is that idea that like we can use route learning in a way that can be successful and can be engaging. And it doesn't have to be negatively looked upon, if that makes sense.
As in, so what's the alternative? What do you mean? I understand what you mean in the context of the UK, but how do you do it in Canada then? What's the
Um,
alternative?
Honestly, how do we do it in Canada? I think it's just honestly, I can't say what the alternative would be because I have not taught the grades where we're learning those things.
Okay.
You know, when I was teaching the 13-year-olds, it was assumed that they would have that knowledge already.
Yeah.
And some people did, some people didn't. And I think there's like a lot more reliance on, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I wish I had like more experience to speak towards it because I just feel like the few years that I have been teaching just doesn't give me enough of a
No, of
background to
course.
say exactly why.
What I am really interested in talking to you about is like SEN and special educational needs, and what's been your experience with that? Someone that I know who's just finished studying, just graduated from University of Sussex.
Mhm.
So she's like 21, 22. She's gone straight into teaching like a reception or a year one class. And I think like 15 or 16 of the students, so 50% of the class have got like EHCPs. Do you know what an EHCP is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure, of course you do. But so they've got like EHCPs, and is that a thing in Canada? Are there that many children that are struggling? And B, why do you think there are so many children that are struggling nowadays?
Yes. So 100% we are seeing like crazy high numbers of students who need like additional support. And that is a huge undertaking for your friend. Good luck to her.
Yeah.
That's really intense. And I yeah, hopefully she's getting the support that she needs for that. But
Mm.
I guess the second reason why I think that that is the case is I don't know what it's like here, but back home, the wait times to get diagnosed for things are so extensive that clearly in prior generations, I think things have just been missed. I don't know if you can attribute the SEN needs to anything specific other than the fact that perhaps we just didn't see it beforehand and that now we are able to better help those students who are struggling. I remember back when I was in school, my brother to this day, I don't even know what he was diagnosed with, if anything, but my parents kept it under such a tight wrap. Like no one talked about it. I wasn't allowed to know about it. It was like the secret. And I think at the end of the day, he just had some difficulty with reading, but it was almost like frowned upon that that was the case for him. And I think nowadays it's much more readily talked about. It's much more open. You know, we kind of are aiming to create equity in the classroom rather than equality. And I think that is probably, I don't even know if I answered your question there. It's so weird being on the other end of the podcast.
I know
It
it is
gets so
weird.
subconscious.
Especially, yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Question.
pardon?
Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's I think that's definitely part of it, but I think I hate the answer of oh, I think we're just more aware of it now. But it
Yeah.
is a valid answer. Like, I think that's such a cover cover up's the wrong word, but I don't I think that's maybe 15-20% of the reasoning, and I think there's loads of other things going on. I think parenting is a big issue. I mean, I'd love to hear your opinions on dealing with modern parents because
Mhm, mhm.
I struggled. And fair enough, I was dealing with children who required extra care compared to the average child potentially, so their parents may be a bit more uptight about the whole situation. But, I only, had to deal with a few. You obviously have to deal with loads. So what's your opinion on parenting, modern day parenting?
That's such a big question. I think people are really being influenced by the whole gentle parenting situation and one of
Would you say gentle?
gentle parenting.
Yeah.
So just, not saying no. I'm sure you've heard of it before, but not saying no and
Yeah.
kind of the boundaries are very blurred, I feel.
Yeah.
One of the things, like, as a teacher, I would say that I'm quite strict. I
Mm.
run a very tight ship, as it were. And one of the things that I think is really important to instill in children is their ability to listen, to respect one another, to follow instruction. And I am finding that that's a really difficult thing to instill in kids. And I don't know if it's because, they're not required to do those things at home. I don't know if it's because, there's other things going on like ADHD or things that, you know, I'm not aware of yet. But that is like such, I swear, I totally forgot your question. Oh my
What
gosh.
parenting?
Parenting, yes. So how do I feel parenting? I don't know. Parents are interesting these days, but there have been okay, let me just rephrase this. There have been many moments in my life where I have made judgment on things before it has happened to me. And then when it has happened to me, I have completely changed my opinion on all of it. So I don't want to sit here and say that like parents are doing it wrong right now because I'm not a parent.
As in because you don't have children?
It's because I don't have children. I have no idea how it would be, you know? Do you have
Well,
children?
yeah. So that's really interesting you bring that up, right? Because
Yeah.
genuinely, within the last month or so, I've had this mini revelation where I was reading up on like alcohol and post like the 1800s, no, pre like maybe the 1800s, it was very normal for parents to basically give their children alcohol.
Mhm.
Because obviously water was so unsanitary and so dangerous. Everyone was drinking alcohol, because it was safer. So, and then that made me think, I'm like, wow, so other than like maybe a brief period, right, between maybe the 1900s where society was so regulated by gender roles and it was so stabilized in part, in my opinion, by gender roles,
Mhm.
whether or not that's wrong or right is a completely different thing, but children had a safe, stable underbelly behind them, so they didn't require as much, or they had access to more one-on-one attention, which is one of the reasons why I think children are struggling because they don't get enough of that nowadays. Other than that period, it's likely that that parents have always been finding ways to entertain and maintain their children's sort of chaotic nature through different sources, and technology, that's the point I'm getting to, is basically just the new form of alcohol, and it's the new regulatory medium that parents
Mhm.
are using because of how challenging it must be to like manage your own life and children's life. I mean, obviously exceptionally rewarding and worth it all the while, but when they're young and they need a lot of attention, you need some form of support. And I remember I read it and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, children were basically, if you read between the lines, semi-drunk or tipsy
Yeah.
a lot of the time, and maybe that was why that helped that gave parents an edge and a useful edge in maintaining them, and that new version is technology nowadays. So, yeah, I mean, parenting is hard, but I know what you mean, like, This is what we were talking about when I was speaking to the other Hayden and Dylan. I think that's their names. What impact does a teacher have if the kids go home and the parents go and undo all the good work that they've done? And do
That's
you want to have children? Sorry, that's a big point. Before you answer that question, comment on my other thing.
that is such an interesting point. The idea that we do all this hard work, then they go home and they can do whatever they want.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really hard because at the end of the day, as much time as you spend with a child, their parents are often going to be the ones who sway with things. And I think nowadays we're definitely more in a culture of pleasing the parents, especially in Canada. We're no longer living in an environment where, students automatically respect me and respect my
No,
authority, if you will.
so true.
And likewise, parents don't always respect me either. And for the most part, I would say the majority of people are pretty easy to get along with. Like, there really isn't any issue because at the end of the day, most people's parents are just wanting the best for the children. And that's what I want for their children is the best. So, in that sense, even if we're coming from two completely different mindsets, we can come together on that shared goal of let's do what's best for your children. But then there's sometimes where parents just come in so hot and fired and whatever's happening in their life is now being put on you.
Is that usually the mums or the dads?
Um it was a mom that I'm speaking of.
Yeah.
It was a mom, yeah, it's hard to play in that scenario, but I think for people that are ever struggling with like a parent relationship or anything of that kind of area is to always remember, like, what is the main goal? The main goal is to have the students succeed, and the parent's main goal is to have their child succeed. And so at the end of the day, that's kind of how I try to frame myself if I'm dealing with a difficult parent, if I'm dealing with multiple different parents that are pulling me in a million different directions. At the end of the day, my focus is to serve your child. And typically that works. Of course, there's times when you have to get like
Yeah.
admin involved, but I think at the most part, as long as you are focusing on that main goal, nothing else matters.